Hi there. So, as well as a couple of naughty videos that I don't know whether to upload or not, comment below if you want me to upload the two naughty videos. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, as well as those, I got a couple of videos on Martinism. I've already touched on this subject on this channel. I have a fascination with Martinism, but also a kind of disappointment surrounding Martinism as well. And I got one video called, How to Become a Martinist, which explains the sort of essence of Martinism as I see it and as I understand it. And then there's also why I want to become a Martinist as well, where I go into a bit of history and a bit of scientific illuminism and a few principles of that. But I don't know whether I'm going to upload those at all, really. I don't know what relevance they have to anything, actually. Um, it's funny, I started. I'll have to get the links in the description box below. But I got a couple of. I started a video on Martinism. I think it's 12 lectures to the Men of Desire by Claude Saint Martin, and I quite I started on those lectures. I didn't get very far because I don't know, all those cosmologies and charts and diagrams and everything pretty much left me pretty cold, really. I kept on thinking, well, what does this all mean? What does this all mean? And of course, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, talk about the pot calling the kettle black. You've got tons and tons of complex charts and cosmologies and metaphysical analyses on this channel. So much so that half of the stuff is pretty much incomprehensible to most people. What do we have to actually do to be a Gnostic, and what is Gnosis anyway? I kind of, so it is interesting that you don't like in other people what you don't like in yourself. So I don't like complexity in myself, and then when I see it reflected in other people's content, then I start to moan about it. Why can't you be more simple? Why can't it all be, you know, sort of distilled into its simplest form, and that got me thinking about and contemplating the whole thing about complexity and versus simplicity. I also watched a video on Catharism, given by somebody in Australia who's a Cathar. And he explained, Catharism in a really, really simple way. And I watched his video throughout. Okay, there's a few things I didn't agree with him on, but by and large, I really liked the way he said it, said what he said, and I liked pretty much all of what he said. And it was pretty much a simple message, really. And it sort of just spoke impromptu from the heart, which is great, really. There's no lecture notes or anything like that. Just what he understands about the Cathar way. And of course, there's a link between Martinism and Catharism, in the sense that Saint-Martin, probably would look into the history of the Cathars and derive inspiration from it. But again, and he himself reacted against complexity and wanted to simplify everything, make everything spiritually simple, and direct and powerful as a result. Again, it got me thinking about complexity versus simplicity. So you've got all these complex charts concerning, Gnostic theology and Gnostic cosmology and Martinist interpretation of same, and some of the esoteric orders that were around during his day and before his day, with all their complex Freemasonry and Freemasonry style way of doing things and looking at things. hugely lists and lists of names, and this is the thing about a lot of the Gnostic Gospels. You've got loads of lists of names of various beings and angels and archangels, and it's also complex, really. And when you distill it right down, when you go into simplicity, at the heart of all this really is love. And love is symbolized by white light. Okay, that's the usual symbol for it. The classical traditional symbol for love in its purest form is white light, and in the Kabbalah, it's Kabbalah. Sorry, you have this Keter, the crown is just pure white light and pure love, and almost inconceivable love, but on some level completely experiential, and possible to experience it on a fundamental level. And you have love, but then when love hits the lower worlds, hits the finite worlds, the worlds of the demiurge, things become more complicated again, really. You've got your white light, but then when white light is refracted through a prism, and that prism is a symbol of the worlds of the demiurge, what you get out from the other side of the prism is not white light, but in fact light divided into its various wavelengths. Richard of York gave battles in vain, which is the colours of the rainbow, and violet has as the shortest frequency, and red has the longest frequency, and all this. And this, of course, Isaac Newton discovered, and others like him, of course, and all very well and good. Spinoza, I think, looked at light and the properties of light. But in symbolic terms, in metaphorical terms, there are lots of different shades of light. There's a spectrum of love, and then between these various frequencies of light, all sorts of fuzzy edges emerge and arise, and you have so there's sort of like fuzzy edges to definitions about what love is, and Plato trying to define love and beauty and truth and all that, because the word love turns out isn't sufficient. You can't just have the word love unless it's going to be some kind of seed mantra. I mean, you could chant the word love, quite freely as a seed mantra. It doesn't have to be a Hindu word or Buddhist word for love. It could be just the English vernacular word love, or whatever the word is in your mother tongue. Amor, amore. And you could just chant that, the word love, as a mantra, so you wouldn't really need to understand it. You have the energy there, which is sort of beyond understanding. But I did say that some people say you also have to understand what it is you're chanting or reciting, so the definition of love, what is love? So anyway, when you get down to the lower worlds, the colours begin to merge together, and it's also mixed with black and white, obviously, positive and negative. And at the end, you get a sort of horrible kind of soupy, brownish, kind of yucky colour, greyish, sort of really horrible colour. And this is what love is in the lower worlds. It's complicated, as it says on Facebook, and I suppose love is ruled by necessity, and love under will, and will identifies necessity, and then reacts according to what is necessary. And you could say that love is doing what is necessary in order to survive, in order to thrive, in order to strive, and to win the game of life. That's what the demiurge wants you to believe love is all about. So then it gets very complicated, and we're faced with moral conundrums of one sort or another, moral dilemmas, and love seems almost so complicated, so diluted, that you hardly have the original light of love left. or the energy of love is become diluted and compromised in various different ways. So it's all rather grim and all rather depressing, in fact, because you started off with this simple, love is truth, love is everything, love is all, and by the end of the journey through life as we know it, what is left of love? Question mark. So then I suppose you go back to complexity, because the complexity of Martinist theology and cosmology basically is present there, and in the positive and negative aspects of that complication, is there to answer the complicated questions with which love is faced in this world. So, you could say that you need to understand love according to love in this world as it is, not how we would wish it to be, and that calls for complicated analyses and complicated categories. And complicated ways of thinking and cosmologies, and so that it's almost like trying to kind of find your way through the complexity in order to re-establish the simplicity of love, one might say. Or you could just simply transcend the whole of this and say, I look to a transcendence. So I'm not really caring what love is like in the lower worlds. I only want to focus my attention on what love is like in the higher worlds, or the infinite world, the infinite transcendental world of the true God. And that's my focus, basically. So I'm going to focus on this ellipse, a set of the circle, which is going round and round and round, defining love and then redefining it, and blah blah blah, and simplicity, complexity, duality, and you're going to say, well, I want to jump right out of all this and just simply have go to the light, go to the white light of love. And indeed, on this level, on this plane of existence, that's why people mantra or create a mantra out of love. Or they say Ram or Jesus Christ as love, and white light, and they focus on white light in their visualization, and they say the word love or Jesus, or Yeshua or whatever, and or Allah. And this, it basically, we don't have to define love because we have the energy of love. It's in our palm. And we also get guidance from the Holy Spirit and also grace from the Holy Spirit. And when we come across difficulties which stretch what love is, and we may be confused as to what love is. We don't know what the loving action is that we should take. Then sometimes, all being well, we will get guidance on the matter, and then we will act according to white light love, love, light, liberty, and life, and not to the opposite of love, light, liberty, and love. But we will not become tyrants. We will not hate life. We will not destroy. We will not take away people's freedoms. And so but it may be that the means justifies the end, and all this, and we get terribly confused. This is the world of dualism, where love becomes itself dualistic, or part of that dualism. And I think so. Simplicity, complexity. I mean, perhaps there is a role for complexity. Perhaps it's necessary to actually look at the details. The devil's in the details, as they say, and that's a really, really interesting sort of aphorism. The devil's in the details when you think about it, because the devil is a demiurge. And the details are the details of life, are the various sort of necessities of life, and that's what you've got to look at and analyze in the following the path of the Freemason or the Martinist, and you've got to be pragmatic about love rather than super idealistic, which sometimes ends in absolute disaster, as we've seen throughout history. So um, I kind of think about these things sometimes when I'm doing my meditation, because I get bored with meditation, bored with being silent, and I come up with all these sort of ideas, and I kind of worry about these things. Instead of getting on with the great work, I worry about these silly little things like whether one should be complex or simple, and everybody else is getting on with their meditation and not worrying about any of this kind of stuff at all. And so basically that's what I've been thinking about, this week. And I did want to go into slightly another confession concerning the naughty videos that I haven't uploaded yet, and I want to upload because they're a bit controversial. And but I try not to be controversial really on this channel. I try to be super clean and nice, and everything kind of white light and lovey dovey and group hugs, because there is so much rancor in the world already, But of course, then often that when love is tested, then you find at the very center of your lovey-dovey, hippie, kind of dippy way of looking at life that there is a huge inadequacy to deal with life. And then what you find is that some people, then you kind of flip over and you sort of lose the plot. Did you ever find this, at school? At the beginning of the academic year, you'd have these teachers and they were really kind of liberal and out there and, well, kind of sort of fluffy and nice, and of course we used to take they used to give an inch and we used to take a yard. And then by the end of the year, these fluffy teachers were absolutely, so stressed and tense. They became absolute tyrants and absolutely horrible people. Whereas the strict teachers at the beginning of the academic year, by the end of the year, they were saying, "Oh, you're the best pupils we've ever had, and you're so well behaved, and you're so academic, and you've done so well over the year." And they were really praising us, and and it felt like whoa, because the teacher was really kind of like, grumpy and and if they didn't say anything if you were doing stuff well. They only criticised you. Yet by the end of the year, they were like all over you. You know what I mean? It's like wow. Perhaps teachers are not like that nowadays, but it certainly used to be in my day, in the 1970s, when I went to school, secondary school, and all the sort of liberal teachers, were all tearing their hair out because we run circles around them, and of course, we take advantage of the fact that they were kind of laid back people. And by the end of the year, we'd stressed them out so much that they weren't laid back people anymore. We completely changed their attitudes. And of course, underneath, the sort of, the kind of niceness was Mr. Nasty, because of course they felt they were losing control, which they were, of their pupils. Whereas the really strict teachers, they had control, they maintained control, and that meant at the end of the year, they could be really, really fluffy and laid out and laid back, and sometimes they were really interesting as well, and come up with some really strange kind of metaphysical ideas and stuff, and wow, this is amazing. Like deliver sort of off the cuff lectures about God and the universe and stuff, and whoa, and amazing. Like, and there were hidden depths of this teacher. You thought there was a grumpy and formal. By the end of the year, they were just saying, wow, amazing, inspiring stuff. So there we are. I mean, is that complexity versus simplicity? I'm not sure how that relates to my central topic. I think it's nice to boil everything down to its simplest possible form, and that's Occam's razor. The empirical method is to take complexity and understand it in such simple terms, and then apply those simple terms to solving very, very, what look like very complex problems, which actually are not complex. They're very, very simple to actually understand. And once you've got hold of the simple principles underlying the complexity of nature, apparent complexity of nature. But on the other hand, maybe complexity is necessary in such a complex world. And if you look at the world too simply and simplify it too much, you end up sort of flipping over and flipping out and getting and losing your chill, and getting really stressed by everything because you thought it was all so easy and nice and everything, and it turns out to be the very opposite. And then you lose your temper over the universe. You know what I mean? Um, so I suppose it's simplicity in the context of complexity, perhaps, but then also complexity in the context of simplicity. There is a simple thing there to find, and love is simple on one hand, and it comes from complexity and goes back to complexity, or you suddenly have a revelation that you can transcend the duality between complexity and simplicity, and find instead a completely transcendental form of love, which doesn't know what you're talking about when you say, "Are you simple? Are you complex?" You just say, what do you mean by that? I don't understand the question." And that would be a great sort of realm to arrive at. Whereas where love couldn't really ask these sort of questions that one asks in the lower worlds.